So I started a different video. I started out as a live, and my internet went down. We're having problems on the island. So if you are joining me, I apologize. Um, Hang on a second. Sorry. Um, yes, we're having difficulties with the internet today. The power went down on the island, and so I may go out again. I will try to stay connected if possible. So, and I will hopefully take the live from what we did and connect it to this so it's together. But I was talking about self-reliance, and one of the things that we need to learn is self-reliance and not being afraid of being alone, not being afraid of self-reliance. Why would that be a fear? And again, I was afraid to be alone. I was afraid to be self-reliant because I was afraid that I would be less attractive, less appealing to a partner if I was self-reliant. I somehow had the belief that if I was a dependent kind of person, that neediness would make me somehow more appealing than someone that was self-reliant and strong and connected to myself. So those kinds of issues come up for us, and we want to look at them and saying, in terms of acknowledging them, like none of this is wrong and none of this is bad. To have any of these thoughts, because all we are is human beings. We're spiritual beings, being a human experience. Hi, Aisha. I think it's Aisha. Nice to see you. Thanks for joining me. Um, uh, so we make ourselves wrong. This is another thing that we make meaning of ourselves. We make ourselves wrong when we have thoughts that are negative about ourselves or others, and we don't talk about them and we don't acknowledge them to ourselves. But the more that we can acknowledge these thoughts, hello, David, nice to see you. Thanks for being here. I don't, you guys, let's see, what am I gonna say? Oh, internet went out a couple of minutes ago. So the video that I had was, I don't know what happened to it, but so I'm kind of starting over and talking about the spiritual lessons of living alone. And now I just got distracted. I just distracted myself. But what I guess I was saying that when we notice thoughts about ourselves that we have, like I was saying, that I was afraid of being self-reliant because I was afraid that that would make me less attractive. So living alone would contribute to me being self-reliant. If I didn't want to be self-reliant, I better find somebody and go live with them quickly, and in them being a man and them being a partner. But that was all based on fear. And when you're in a relationship based on fear, you can't be your authentic self. And you can't allow you can't allow yourself likely to see the other person in their authenticity, because the relationship is based on fear. It's not based on growing each other and supporting each other and empowering each other and loving each other into their own fullest expression. I didn't want to be my fullest expression. I was frightened about that. And so if I didn't want me to be in my fullest expression, I probably wouldn't want my partner to be in their fullest expression. So the more that I was able to see what I was up to, I was able to be more clear about what I needed to do. So when I realized I was afraid of self-reliance, it was like, I got to learn to be self-reliant. When I would have thoughts about, for instance, I talk about wanting to build a house here, and I don't have the finances to do that. And it's like, I'll get a partner. When I have a partner, I'll build that house. And it's like, yeah, no, maybe that's a possibility, but there's no self-reliance in there that I can create that. And I'm in the process of creating that in my own way through the spiritual lessons I'm here to learn. But that thought, like, I can't do this without a man, or I can't do this without a partner, or whatever those thoughts are, those get in the way of me actually having a fulfilling life and a fulfillment of my human spirit. There was a time when I lived in Nova Scotia, and I lived in this wonderful house. It was over 100 years old. And by that time, I was living, I don't know, I'd lived alone on and off for a long time. Hi, Fred. Nice to see you. And somebody had given me a lot of lands, bushes and trees from their yard. They had moved away, and they said, "Oh, take whatever you want." And so I was out in my yard, and I would, people, and this is a tiny little community in Nova Scotia, and people would honk their horn and they'd wave, and I'd stop what I was doing and I'd wave, and I'm working away and digging stuff and putting bushes in, and very, very engaged in what I'm doing. And I had this thought. I said, I wonder if they think I'm lonely. And then I stopped, and it was like, wow, it was one of the moments, the first moments in my life where I realized I wasn't lonely. I wasn't having those moments of, I wish somebody else was here with me. I wish somebody was here to take care of me. I wish there was somebody to do this for me. It was a moment of fulfillment of my human spirit. And I was delighted and engaged and in love with what I was doing and making my home a more wonderful place for me. But those are those moments that we want to grow ourselves into and through, is those moments of resistance. Like, if I go do this, so many of people, it's like, if I go do this, or if I enjoy myself, then I won't want a partner because I'm enjoying myself alone. And it's like, yeah, that's part of the point, isn't it? That you can enjoy yourself on your own, and you can also enjoy yourself with other people. That you now have a choice, rather than, I'm afraid to have a great life on my own because that would mean that I won't have a partner. So the fear of living alone, the fear of becoming self-reliant, and realize, wacky day on the internet. So the fear of living alone, the fear of becoming self-reliant, and realize, that's so weird. So the fear of living. So the fear of living alone. Stop. The fear of becoming. My iPhone keeps playing my video. So mostly in our lives, we're here to notice when we're afraid. And those thoughts of a fear can show up in so many different ways. And when we can see how we're afraid, or we can see how we're functioning within that fear, we can be more at choice. And again, that's the key of all of this, is being at choice about, am I going to make choices based on fear, that if I'm self-reliant, nobody would want me, or if I am self-reliant, that I can't build a house on my own, or if I'm self-reliant, something else. But all of these thoughts are fear-based. And it's like, I don't want to live my life fear-based. I could feel the angst and the anxiety of that. And so there's a point of choice where you go, I want it different. I want a life of fulfillment, no matter what. So the more that we can understand that, the more that we can be in alignment with that truth, no matter what. David, you've mentioned previously that you've got some health issues that you deal with and struggle with, and that sometimes it creates a sense of isolation. I hope you don't mind me bringing that up, but it's one of those places where we're still, we have these times in our lives where we don't have the control to make it different, to make your health better, to make the isolation less, and to bring in people that'll bring in fulfillment or happiness or joy or playfulness. Sometimes we don't have those choices. So what choices do we have? And this again brings us into the spiritual questioning or spiritual lessons. Like, what am I here to deal with? Christian Sundberg talks about one of his big lessons he realized was to be with the agony of no way out. That's my interpretations how he says it, that there's an agonizing of that there's no way out of this situation that he was in. He was in a lot of pain. He was had a disease and a sickness that had caused him a lot of true fear and anguish. And so part of that he realized was a life lesson that he'd come here to learn, was how to be in that state of no way out and the agony of knowing that. Um, and we can learn that. We I don't know if we can learn it, but we have the opportunities to learn it through many, many, many different portals, many, many different curriculums, many, many different circumstances in life. And if it's ours to learn, there's nothing we can do about that except to go, okay, I got to learn and I got to be with that. I've got to engage with my reality as it is. And how do I do that? How do I do that? And there's a lot of insanity in doing that when we go, there's no way out. And so what's the point? What's the point of staying on the planet? Why don't I just take myself off the planet? What's the point of staying um, and working through this issue? I've been in those moments many times in my life, and I'm grateful for the lessons that have come through that. A friend of mine, I'll call him Whitney, his partner committed suicide. He didn't, and my friend, uh, he didn't know that was going to happen. And so after they'd been together for quite a long time, their partnership was a long time, and his partner committed suicide, and it was an insane moment. And because this was pre-marriage time where gay people could be married, he didn't have any rights. He didn't have any rights to the letter that his partner wrote. He didn't have any rights to the ownership of property and all of those kinds of things. He was questioned by the police that he might be a suspect in a murder. And so that insanity was so huge, and the loss of his partner. And then he had to leave for certain circumstances. His job situation wasn't good, and so he ended up having to leave that, and he had to leave the city he was living in, and it was horrendous, as you can imagine. All of this brought on. He didn't say, "Oh, I think I'm going to do this and do that." This is all something that was happening to him, the circumstances, and he ended up. He was sober for 20, 30 years, and he ended up using again. And for 4 years, he was in it. He was back in his addiction, and trying to stay sane enough to stay in his body, to stay in his life. And so the insanity of what shows up in our world, in our personal world, that is confronting us to learn lessons. And quite often, again, our aloneness or our living alone times are brought on by circumstances of people's dying or death or separation and relationships and all of those kinds of things. So huge, huge lessons of being with what's horrendous, being with what brings about a sense of powerlessness and hopelessness and helplessness, and questioning the reality of that, questioning what do you do? The 12-step, every 12-step program, every fellowship it started out with alcoholism, but all of the fellowships of 12 steps have start out with the step one of admitting I'm powerless over the 12 steps is I'm powerless over my addictions, but it comes down to I'm powerless over people, places, and things. I'm powerless over circumstances. I'm powerless in this moment of whatever is in front of me. And that's huge to admit and to be with. The serenity prayer is an embracing of that, of grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change. So that place of acceptance comes from that place of admitting I'm powerless over it. I have no choice. And the second part of the serenity prayer, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can. So when you're in circumstances like what I was talking about with my friend Whitney, it's like, what is possible for him to change? And the insanity of his situation was just abhorrent. It was horrible. And then the last part of the serenity prayer, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. And with the support of friends and Whitney's mom and then the fellowship, he got back on track with his life, and he now says he's exceptionally grateful for all of that that happened, because he has a greater sense of self and a greater sense of truth in his life that he's living than ever before. And he gives me courage, the extraordinariness of his situation. Um, And so many people on the planet have those kinds of extraordinary situations and circumstances in their lives that they're living with. And and so that's part of what we're here to be with, is these moments of the insanity of the situation, but finding that way through it, the dark night of the soul, the how do I be in this moment, in this moment, in this moment. Again, the slogan, one of the slogans of 12 steps is just for now, just for today, just for this moment, just this moment, this moment. And going through times of aloneness or living alone can bring us into these devastating places of, there's nobody here. There's no one that cares about me. There's no one that I can rely on. It's just me. And the truth of that can be devastating if we've been pretending or hoping. And this is another element of our training, I think, is the degree to which we live in hope and wishing. And you know, our the existentialness, because we exist, hope is really important. You know, I was watching this morning, we'd had like it's beautiful snowy day. I don't know if you can see back there. Uh, but there was an opening in the clouds and silver lining kind of thing. It was like I felt this uplifting, you know, this sense of hope, like the day is going to get better and beautiful. That hope is so essential to our nature. But it's when we use our hope and wishes to 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 ignore what we're being with today. You know, I hope I find a partner today. I hope I find a partner. I hope the money comes. I hope and all of these hopes that keep us in the future, but don't keep us living in the truth of what is. And the is I may be alone right now. I may be alone. I am alone. Does that mean something? We have to explore all the meaning that we make, and that again, that was the second week of this. All the meaning that I make of it that makes me feel bad or guilty or shame or worthless or unlovable. Exploring all those meanings is part of what we're here as a spiritual lesson. It's part of taking inventory of those thoughts that keep us from being fulfilled or fulfilling our human spirit. And over, especially when I start to when I decide to do a theme for the month like this, living alone, then I become more conscious of what have I been going through, what's the process that I am in even now, living alone, and being with the challenges of living alone. um, a couple months ago, and you guys probably have heard this, that we had a big rain, and it was torrential. And it's like the third year we've had torrential rains, which breaks down roads, and it breaks down, you know, there's mudslides, all kinds of stuff. And there was a part of me that went, I can't do this anymore. And I kind of went and got triggered into a trauma, like a PTSD trauma. And it was like it lasted a long time. And it wasn't as if I have a PTSD and now I'm just going to function or function or function or do whatever I would do, which used to be like get in a relationship or have sex or, you know, eat or drink or something. It was like, no, I have to be with this consciously. The trauma of what I was feeling, the experience I was feeling, it's a lesson opportunity to be with that, the challenge of what is. And my body's shaking and it's unhappy and I'm scared and all of this stuff. There's nothing to be, I'll tell you, there is nothing to be afraid of. But everything that was going in my mind was saying that I needed to be afraid, but there was nothing to be afraid of. And so I had support, I had love, everything was great. And inside, I had to be with the truth of this part of me that had had some experiences somewhere, sometime that was challenging. and being with this fear and being with the I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know. In the insanity that we create in our minds, I had to be with all of that in a way that allowed those emotions to release, to let go, to detox, to purge that stuff, to let it out so that I'm left with, a snowstorm and freezing weather comes and I'm not afraid because that had diminished. The traumas, that the PTSD, it's diminished so that I have a clear ability to be present in the moment, to see what needs to be done, to be self-reliant, to know when it's time to call on other people for help. All of those things becomes clearer as we participate more clearly in our lives. Again, accepting what we cannot change. Can't change the weather. Can't do that. The courage to change the thing I can. I could be with my PTSD in a way that allowed it to heal and to uplift so that I'm not in it. Allow the courage to let go of all of the fears and just enjoy this beautiful weather. So all of it is part of that process, but it's the spiritual lessons of being with what is. And again, using the 12 steps in the Serenity Prayer are a big deal. Now, I've only talked about one of the 12 steps right now. A lot of people aren't happy about AA or NA or any of the 12-step programs because they say, oh, it's a spiritual program. But it's such an important realization, especially when we're in those places where it's like, I'm powerless to it. I have to admit that I'm powerless over my circumstances, over people, places, and things. I have to admit that's true. And step 2 is coming to know that there is a higher power that is here to help bring back the sanity. And what I'm realizing over and over is that higher power we can think of as God, but it's a higher wisdom within me. I have a higher wisdom that I don't listen to very much. I'm listening to it more and more. But the part of me that's afraid is a little person. And little as in the ego self is fear-based. But there's a higher power and a higher me, a higher truth that I can rely on. And that's what I want for you, is that higher truth to be more accessible to you so that you can know that and appreciate it and go there. So come to realize a power greater than myself that can restore me to my sanity. That can be God, that can be your angels, that can be a sponsor, that can be a therapist or a doctor or a nurse, it can be your partner, it can be anybody or anything. But at that point, we say, in the third step is I turn it over. I'm letting go and letting God. I let go of this because I don't have power over it anyway. I'm out of control. Accepting what I cannot change. I turn it over. Big practices. It takes training. And a lot of people in 12-step programs, they say those words, but they're not training themselves to actually admit the truth of I'm powerless. Admit that there's a power greater than myself that will restore me to my sanity. Admit that I can turn this over. And that's training. That takes a lot of it takes courage, and it takes strength. Courage and strength. That's the basics. Okay. So I'm going to just go through some lists here. I've talked a lot, and I hope some of it was valuable. And if you're still here, if you have something to share, I would love to hear your thoughts about what I've said so far. One of the things that a spiritual lesson is really questioning my worthiness in terms of how if I'm able to really look at and be mindful of the thoughts that go through my head, and the emotions that show up when I'm in a state of angst. I'm probably not in a state of worthiness. I've probably gone into fear-based, and fear-based is usually based on some level of devaluing or de-worthing myself. And so being able to get to a point where my worth is no longer in question, that's a really good thing. And that's what I would like for everyone, is to have that time with themselves so that their worth, that's based on their inner knowing, not based on the external, not based on my worth is based on the fact that I have a husband or a partner or children. My worth was all based on that. Or my worth was based on the fact that I'd have a house or a job or a career or so much money in the bank. None of that. It's my worth. That's not my lesson. My lesson is living in a travel trailer, with my job and my dog and all those kinds of things, but not being able to say, see how great I am, see how wonderful I am. I've written a lot of books, but it's not like they're bestsellers yet. And so I can't point at them and go, see, I'm now a bestseller. That makes me awesome and worthwhile. My worth I've had to extract all of that, and just my worth is no longer in question here. Can be, you guys might be questioning my worth sitting here watching and observing, but the truth is that my worth is no longer in question here, and that's the point. My aloneness, number 2, my aloneness is a consequence of a belief I've held about being unworthy of love. And if I'm unworthy of love, then I'm unworthy of safety, protection, care, and kindness. And I could have to continually provide that for myself. I continually be compassionate, generous of spirit, create that sense of care, create the safety for myself, because we've always wanted somebody else to create that sense of safety for ourselves. You know, if I had a husband, or if my children would just come and live near me, or whatever it is, I would have a sense of safety. But my lesson, your lessons are going to be what your lessons are. My lessons are, I need to create the space of all of that for myself, the sense of safeness, trust myself. I'm a very accomplished person. I laugh because I live within this body as if I can't take care of myself. The other day I had on my fuse box, there was a little red light, and couldn't figure out how to change the fuse. It's very simple. And to make that red light go out, well, it turned out that I was pulling the wrong fuse. And then once I figured that out, I fixed, and it felt so empowering. You had thought that I had, you know, taken a car off a person that had gotten stuck under a cart. I mean, it was that, like, oh my God, aren't I just amazing? I just changed the fuse. But the level to which we can really embrace the truth of who we are, the truth of who you are, that you're an incredibly accomplished person, regardless of who you do, whatever age you are, you've accomplished whatever it's taken to get you here. And it's one of the things that I love about my work as a transformational life coach, is I get to witness the extraordinariness of any individual, every individual, because of who they are in their existence. They're just incredible. You are incredible, and I get to have that opportunity to witness that in people. It's just the best thing in the world, and this is the practice for me of living alone, is that I've come to this place of being willing to acknowledge my own extraordinariness, that I don't need a partner, and I don't need a lot of money, and I don't need a house, and I don't need blah, blah, blah to demonstrate. Those things would be nice. They will be nice. But right now, I don't need that to demonstrate my worth or my value, or that I have a great life. Time alone provides us with an opportunity to notice and question our thoughts and beliefs about who we are, to practice living in alignment with our spiritual principles. This is a time for us, potentially, each of us, to perhaps take up a spiritual practice, or a practice of looking at a spiritual practice. For me, is like discovering what your principles are, your spiritual principles, and are you living according to your principles? That's it. And having the faith to live according to your principles. That's a spiritual practice. Anything else is probably in the way. So It's like when I was unhappy, it's like I'm unhappy because I'm not living by my principles. So what are my principles? And then having the faith to take the leap of faith of saying, okay, I will practice that. So for instance, where I would make excuses for whatever, making excuses is not in alignment to my higher truth, my higher knowing, my principles of integrity. So if I'm lying or making excuses in a lie, then I'm out of alignment. So the leap of faith is to say, I'm not going to lie about that. I'm not going to make an excuse about that. It's not some big major leap of faith. I'll never lie. I'll never make excuses. It's one moment at a time. And the more that we can do that for ourselves, we grow the capacity one leap at a time, one moment at a time. And so when we can see our thoughts, take the time to really listen and go, that is not in alignment with my truth. What am I going to do about that? Okay, I'm going to practice. I'm going to train myself to stop that. Judgment is judging other people or judging myself. It's not in alignment with my principles, spiritual principles. It's probably not in alignment with yours. So you go, okay, stop. Train myself to stop doing what doesn't work. So when we have more time alone, you may live with another person, but taking time alone throughout the day or whatever gives you the opportunity to really look at what are my spiritual principles and am I willing to live according to that. Spiritual practice doesn't mean that you're praying, doesn't mean that you're meditating, because those things people do, but it doesn't necessarily mean they're living in alignment with their principles, spiritual principles. So living alone is an opportunity to do that. Time alone allows us to face our fear-based thoughts. Excuse me. We can train ourselves to know ourselves as worthy of connecting and engaging outside of fear. You've heard me, if you've watched me at all, I talk about the fullest expression of our essential nature and that we're here as divine beings to be the expression of divinity, to be the expression of life. And that expression of life might be pain and suffering. It might be anger and rage or anguish, and maybe despair and despondence. Those are all expressions of divinity too. They're not just happy, joyful. It's all of it. And so when we have the opportunity to be the fullest expression of life through this body, then amazing things show up for ourselves. I've had the most exquisite moments that were the most desperately deep, anguishing kinds of experience, but it was like, wow, that's amazing. People watch movies to have that experience. And I think we're all here to have that experience so that it can be an expression through this vehicle that we're in. Grief is a huge part, I think, of this process of living alone, because we may come to the point of saying, I'm alone and I've lost all my relationships, or I've lost people that were important to me or value. I've lost connections in ways that were really important to me, or the childhood dreams. The loss of a dream. There was a point, I think, in my 30s or 40s where I realized my childhood dreams weren't coming to fruition, and that was a very sad moment for me. And I look at how I kind of hold on. Some of us hold on to grief. We don't actually grow ourselves beyond it, and we can. When we see that grief is related to our attachments to thoughts and beliefs and ideas, which includes people. We have ideas about people, and we are attached to those beliefs and those ideas, and those attachments is what we're afraid to give up, and that's what creates so much grief. So through time alone, we're faced with, wow, I don't have a partner, I don't have children around, I don't have fill in the blanks, and I have too much time on my hands, or whatever that is that creates the sense of sadness and grief. And so this is a really good time of emptying ourselves of that grief over time in the ways that come, one at a time. we can become aware of the resistance and resentments that we have to letting go of what we're afraid to lose. Um, I have wanted a house on the hill, and I sometimes get pissed off and resentful that I don't have it. And so I look at that and I go, let's look at that. Not as because everything, if I'm pissed off and resentful, I got some work to do. If I'm angry or sad, I got some work to do. If I'm anything but fully deeply content, I got work to do, because my I'm here to align myself with my highest truth. And also that means experiencing those resentments and the despondence and the frustrations and the anger and the in those places of insanity, so that I can move beyond them in the ways that I can. So when we're sometimes people don't, I don't want to admit that I'll never be married again. I don't want to admit that I won't have a house. I don't want to admit, blah blah blah. Okay, you don't want to admit that. I totally get it. That's a big be with. It's a big fat be with. You don't want to admit it, but in admitting that you don't want to admit it, it's there. It's with you, and it's a very big moment, an important moment, that when we can say, I don't want to admit that I'm whatever that is. It's a big moment of truth and acknowledgement and opening with yourself. And that's what are available as spiritual lessons when we're living alone. There's a lot of people who are out here in the world. Like I think I mentioned, there's like 32 million people who live alone. So a big source of connection that's possible. But there are also therapists or life coaches or 12 programs or ministers or spiritual guides, all kinds of people that are in the world that are here to serve and support you through this process. So you don't have to go through this alone without some support. Um, a woman I know, I'll call her Susan. She's lived alone a lot of her life. She's in her late 30s, and she just lost her dog, which is one of her best friends. She's been working with a therapist, but the therapist it's not working for her. She needs something else because she's not dysfunctional. She needs support in a different way. And so I referred her to a life coach that I truly trust and respect. And because we need someone to talk to about life issues, not to fix them, but to really honor the process of the listening of ourselves to ourselves. That to me is that one of the greatest, again, the greatest gift is I support people in listening to what they're saying for themselves and what's true for themselves. I'm a thinking partner for them. And that's the work that I do. So when we can be thinking partners for other people so they can listen to what they need to hear for themselves, it brings about greater degrees of serenity and acceptance and a deep contentment. And that's what I'm all about for you and for everybody else. I use the word assuage in this last one. We assuage our loneliness with substances, shopping, gaming, social media. So a lot of times when we're able to see, okay, I'm not actually living a life, I'm actually just doing everything I can to distract myself or avoid my situation and avoid the feelings that I'm feeling because of my situation. That's a place where, again, we can begin to get conscious of, this is not making me happy. It doesn't mean I have to go get a partner. It might be, hey, get a roommate, that might help. But it might be, I'm trying to avoid myself. I'm trying to ignore myself. And it's not working. It isn't working. And even if you get a partner or a roommate, if you're using that person as a way to avoid and ignore, it's not going to work. It's not going to work. I can guarantee you that, because we're not here to avoid and ignore and distract ourselves. We're here to learn lessons. And you may not want to hear that. And I don't necessarily like telling it all the time, but that's, the more I get that, the more I get to be conscious of the truth of that and become more fulfilled in my own life. So I think that's pretty much it for today. Next month, January, I'm going to talk about deep recovery. So I've worked in recovery for 40 years. I worked specifically in recovery when I lived in Nova Scotia in the what used to be called the Nova Scotia Commission on Drug Dependency. And I worked in recovery for 8 years before I started doing other things. So we're going to talk about recovery, not only from substances or behaviors that are like gambling or prostitution or all those kinds of things, retailing. Those are specifics, but we're going to talk about recovering ourselves, deep recovery from where we are avoiding and distracting ourselves in habitual ways and becoming more conscious of that. So that'll start next Thursday, which is January 6th, 2022. And if you're interested, you'll find links next time. All right. Thank you for being here, you guys. And I hope this has been valuable for you. Please leave a comment below if you have something to share about your own personal experience of living alone. Again, the boot camp is boot camp for self-transformation. The links are below. And if you like this video, please give me a thumbs up. It lets me know that this is valuable to you. All right. Thanks again. Bye for now.